Thank you for joining yet another Tattered Cover virtual event series. My name is Adam. I am the director of events at Tattered Cover Bookstore here in Denver, Colorado. If you're unfamiliar with our bookstore, we have been around for 50 years, and it is thanks to readers like you and tonight's guests who continue to publish novels for why we're still around after all these years. If you're local to Denver, stop on by. We are open. We are doing some in-person events, so check out tatteredcover.com/events for all those events. And tonight I am so excited to welcome an amazing author who is releasing a new book called One Step Too Far. I'm of course talking about Lisa Gardner, who will be in conversation with Mark Greaney. And I'm going to read you their bios because both of these writers are just tremendous people. And I'm just so blown away that we have both of them tonight. And I also want to thank all of you who are watching live and who may be watching this on Tattered Cover's YouTube down the road. This is available for stream. So if you're not watching it live, thank you for watching it this weekend when you're eating brunch or whatever. Mark Greaney's research for the Gray Man novels, including Relentless, 1 Minute Out, Mission Critical, Agent in Place, and so many more. We're up to 11. Sierra 6 is the most recent one. Has taken him on more than 20 countries and trained alongside military and law enforcement in the use of firearms, battlefield medicine, and close range combative tactics. He has written the New York Times bestseller with Marine Lieutenant Colonel Rip Rawlings. It's a book called Red Metal. He's also the author of numerous New York Times bestsellers in the Tom Clancy series. I know that's not officially what it's called, but you know who Tom Clancy is, so I'm sure you know who Mark Greaney is. And tonight's guest of honor, releasing this amazing new mystery thriller that is just flying off shelves, is Lisa Gardner. She is the New York Times best-selling author of 24 suspense novels, including The Neighbor, which won Thriller of the Year from International Thriller Writers. She's an avid hiker, traveler, cribbage player. You don't see that often in author bios. And she currently lives in the mountains in New Hampshire with her family. Lisa and Mark, thank you so much for joining Tattered Cover. Please virtually walk into our event space. How are you two doing?
Good, how are you?
Well,
I'm so amazed. I can't wait to watch this. I'm going to hop off and turn it over to Mark and Lisa. Lisa, congratulations on One Step Too Far. Another amazing book. Congratulations.
thank you, Adam, and thank you for having us tonight.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Great to see you, Lisa. Thanks for having me on with you. This has been exciting. This has been on my calendar for a while, so it's fun to finally get the moment.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so happy in all the crossover of our writing careers and conferences, I'm not sure we've ever gotten to talk before, have we?
I met you in 2009 very, very briefly, so I remember that. Yeah, but yeah, don't say yeah. It's okay. No, but I'm excited to talk about your new book, which I picked up Tuesday and finished this afternoon, and really love. And I have a ton of questions. I have a lot of questions about the third act, but I'm not going to ask them because I don't want to ruin anything. But it's terrific book. First, I thought I would start because I follow you on social media, and I know you went to Antarctica. And I want to know why and sort of what you took away from it. I mean, it seems like it would be an amazing trip. I think I would love to go, but it's just not a place that I've, given any thought to. So what was it that sent you there? Was it research or was it pleasure or was it a bucket list thing?
Penguins. Pretty much
about
penguins.
The penguins. Okay. All right.
And people are going to see a lot more posts of penguins just because I missed them and I'm starting to go through like the 3,000 photos I took while I was there. But I am a huge traveler. And actually, you and I have something in common. We're both international relations majors. If what I read.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah.
So I don't do international travel for my books, which you do for your series, because mine are always domestic, but I just like traveling internationally.
Right.
Antarctica was my sixth continent. It was absolutely even more stunningly beautiful than I thought it would be. And I think everyone should go. And now in September, I'm going to go to the Arctic because once you've done the Antarctic, you might as well go to the Arctic.
Oh, wow. Wow. Within a year of each other, you're going to hit both poles there. That's pretty great. So what is the seventh continent? I must ask you, Australia? Or
I haven't made it to Australia. And I actually, my family loves tennis and I really would like to go to the Australian Open, but I need things to be open.
Yeah, right. Everything's come to a grinding halt. But I mean, it's great to see you on that trip. It's a lot of fun to sort of vicariously see people travel to places that you haven't been or even places that you have been. So yeah, I thought that was really, really cool. And a place I've never been, but would love to go sometime. So we're going to talk about your book, obviously. This is the second book in the Frankie Elkin series. And I guess before I dig into the book a little bit, can you tell me, when you wrote the first book, did you see this as a series from the beginning, or do you wait for a reader response? Or actually, I know you've done several series in your career, and you've also done several standalones. So two-part question to make things confusing. Why did you decide to continue this as a series? And then just sort of historically, why, like what is the deciding factor about continuing a series?
Well, I think the real issue you're already bringing up is there's kind of lack of planning to my whole career. I'll be honest. I kind of think of an idea first, and then I come up with characters that fit that. And then it turns out I have a really hard time letting them go. So Before She Disappeared, which is the first Frankie Elkin book, and it was inspired by a real life phenomenon of everyday people who are now getting active and working cold cases. Because if forensics was going to solve it, if the police were going to solve it, they would have by now. So kind of the amateur sleuth angle. But there's this real life woman who really does go from town to town, working these cases all on her own. It's just, she's very concerned about the number of missing that fall through the cracks. So that became the inspiration. And so I wrote a book Before She Disappeared. And then I was like, okay, but then I came up with another idea. So now we have a second Frankie Elkin book. But it's all a hot mess. I don't really have a great plan in place.
Yeah. Well, so a writer for sure, but also a really good reader can tell when an author has done the level of research an author has done. I mean, it's usually pretty evident in the story, whether they've just Googled something, or you can get away with that. I mean, we've all done it, and found out information that way. But there was an intimacy with the subject matter of the wilderness and hiking and search and rescue and all these sorts of things in this book. It was a really, really rich story plot wise because of that. And we'll get into the characters in a minute, but like I really was, I was pulled into something I didn't know anything about and very fascinated by it. And I was like, she obviously didn't like spend the night in the backyard with her kids in a tent. There's a lot of like minutia stuff in there that I thought was really added to the story. So what is your relationship with the outdoors, and even going to search and rescue a little bit, because you obviously know some very specific information about that?
So I live in the mountains, and I'm a huge hiker. It's kind of my hobby, my passion. It's actually part of my writing process. Every time I get stuck, I go outside, I go for a hike. So needless to say, I log quite a few miles, because I think as an author, you can testify, we spend most of the process stuck, actually. So one of the things I read that inspired One Step Too Far, then, that struck very close to home for me, was the number of people that are missing on national public lands, they call it. So basically there's 1,600 people that are lost in our wilderness. And again, no one's looking for them anymore. And I live in a local community where search and rescue it's largely volunteer efforts, fish and game, that kind of stuff. So you see everyone pull together, and there's a real genuine intensity, support. I mean, people definitely always want to find that missing child, hiker, elderly person that wandered off. But as time passes, they are volunteers. They have to go back to their everyday life. Right. And then these cases fall through the cracks, and there's no closure for the families involved. And that became kind of one of the perfect things for Frankie to work on then. And it was really, really good for me. Mark and I talked about this a little bit in the green room. We want to make our writing process interesting. So if we do fun things and put them in books. So every time my publisher tried to call me last year and I was like, I'm not available, I didn't have to say I was hiking. I could say I was working.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Actually, I got the audio book for your book on Tuesday, as well as the hardback. So Tuesday afternoon, I was hiking for an hour. We have a 100-acre off-leash dog park near where I live with my 4 dogs, and listening to your book. And inevitably, I look around and I've only got 3 dogs, so I had to go back to the woods and figure out where the 4th one was. Every time I put an audio book in, I lose a dog for about 5 minutes. So far, nothing bad has happened. I want to talk a little bit about the characters in the book. Just me personally, I look back in my career, and early in my career, my main characters were pretty nicely fleshed out, and I'm proud of that. And I'm proud of the books overall. But then you kind of look yeah, then you kind of look back and you go, well, some of these supporting characters were kind of out of central casting, and in this book, it was just really super rich. Like Luciana and Namath and Bob, who was a Bigfoot hunter. We're going to talk about
Bigfoot
that.
Bob.
Yeah, and so there's all these characters, even the boy or the young men that are involved in this story. They were all very distinguished and fleshed out. So can you tell me a little bit about like how you flesh out supporting characters like that?
Well, so Mark, I think you get characterization a gold star given the Gray Man and just how huge and great that series is, and it is because of the character that people come back again and again. Yeah. So I think you and I both agree the characters really matter. I think in suspense, the plots are fun and we want to be twists and turns and surprise. But if you don't care, so that's one of the things I think about. So when I was going to write One Step Too Far, I know I'm going to have a search party going into the woods, and I need to make the missing young man, Timothy O'Day, human, or why do we care? And the best way to do that was to have his own father involved and to show again that the very real pain and anguish for families when you don't know what happened. I mean, it's almost a death, but they don't get to mourn it because they don't have that closure yet. So then it was like the three groomsmen that were with him, the guilt-stricken friends that lost their buddy, so to speak, in the woods. And then in Wyoming, and one of the reasons I picked it is because there's so much, not just off the grid remote, but not even marked trails in Wyoming. So an expert guide is highly recommended in Wyoming. And then the thing I didn't know I needed to know was Bigfoot Bob. But I don't know, in terms of writing them, they kind of come together to me. But part of it, I think the fleshing out part you're talking about is I don't know the ending of the book. I don't know who did it. I know I have a party of 8 going into the woods, and it's almost a closed door mystery, even though it's in the wide open Wyoming. Because one of these people, as bad things start to happen and they start looking at each other, someone here did something wrong, but I don't even know who. So everyone has to be likable, but everyone also has to have some flaws. So at the end, you haven't written yourself in a corner.
Right. And even the character who's missing, Timothy, I mean, he has flaws as well that sort of play into the story. And I thought that was really neat. You made him an actual character, even though he's not sort of on screen, as they say. And I liked how that worked. You just mentioned that everybody's sort of off the grid, and this is an off the grid story. And I guess when I was reading it, I was fascinated. I was like, this could have taken place 150 years ago because you've taken all technology out of it because of first, Frankie in the first place is not, she's not a computer hacker, or she's not, she's not using her drone or anything like that. She's just a very intuitive person who's very passionate about what she's doing. And I thought that was terrific. But what were some of the challenges, or I guess advantages? And I think as a writer, there's probably a lot of advantages of just removing technology from the equation and just making it, that kind of a story.
I will admit, removing technology was my favorite part of the writing experience. So this is my official pandemic book. The other book I'd written part way before we went into lockdown, but One Step Too Far all happened during the pandemic. So there's a couple things I think a lot of us were dealing with. One, I was hiking really a lot because you want to get out as much as you can. And of course, our jobs, everyone's jobs, are now more tied to a computer than ever. So I think part of picking Wyoming, because I just wanted to spend mentally that kind of space, and then no technology, because in our everyday life, it's like everywhere. And I like the challenge of it. And it was interesting when I talked to the search and rescue guys. There's a lot of technology now for search and rescue, but most of them, I once interviewed a fugitive tracker. He said the same thing. Out in the actual wild, very few of these toys perform the way, they're all still pretty hardcore believers in it's manpower, intuition, logic, common sense. That's how you're going to solve the problem.
Yeah. So I learned so much about search and rescue reading this book, and it was really, really fascinating. And it made me think of, there's always something on the news. You don't go a week without hearing of some missing hiker or missing, this or that, or some sort of search for a fugitive or something like that. And it made me, see that from the inside. And I thought that was a fascinating part to this story. Is there a part of you like the wilderness, and you're obviously very passionate about this search and rescue, and you just show that you're very passionate about missing people. Is there part of you that wants to be a Frankie Elkin and go out and do some of this yourself?
You know, I think often we write about our fantasy life. I mean, I can't help myself. I am a homebody. I love my house, my dogs, the family, my community. But I have to admit, you know, the fact that Frankie has no ties, that she doesn't have the steady job, she doesn't have the white picket fence, she doesn't have a stable relationship. And interesting enough, leading this kind of nomadic life is also what's working for her. It's enabling her not to drink as a recovering alcoholic.
Right.
Well, at the same time, she's kind of envious of everyone. You know, she sits in restaurants and she watches, you know, what look to be the perfect families, though she knows from her own work they probably are not. Or these happy people going through like everyday life. And she's still kind of, why can't she do that? But she can't. And I think it makes her appealing. She's leading a life kind of would be fun in theory, but you can see in her, there's some real pain to it as well.
Yeah. My favorite character, to be perfectly honest, was Daisy. And you know, I'm a big dog lover myself. I have 4 rescue dogs. I know I've known for about 20 minutes that you're a dog lover yourself, because you picked your dog up and showed her to me just a minute ago. But so tell me about you know, anything specific with you went into a lot of specifics with the search and rescue dog, and Daisy is a character in this book. Daisy is not just the dog that tags along. Daisy is integral to the really the whole story. And I thought that was terrific. Like, what's your relationship with dogs, and specifically search and rescue? What kind of research did you do on, you know, cadaver dogs?
So clearly I am a huge dog lover, and I have various dogs laying around us right now who so far are not barking, and I'm forever happy about that. But, I had an opportunity actually a while back to go to the Body Farm. And while I was there in Tennessee, in your home state, I just happened through sheer serendipity, there was a search and rescue team with cadaver dogs, which is the rarest kind of training. Many teams just don't get quite that far. And they were there because, you know, cadaver dogs, they needed some training materials, and you're not allowed to bury people in your backyard. Apparently it violates the laws. And it was very interesting because they were very passionate on, they wanted real material to train with. They don't like synthetic scent, which is one of the things that comes up in One Step Too Far. How do you train a cadaver dog? What makes for a good training? But what struck me at the time wasn't just playing with the dogs, which of course, you know, you have to do. And one more thing, my publisher calls, I'm really playing with a bunch of search and rescue dogs, but still it's working. Was the respect even the forensic anthropologists had. I mean, and you know, they're often sent out as part of teams to recover human remains. And they were just totally, completely in awe. There's nothing as good out there. No technology better than a dog's nose. And so really, in One Step Too Far, Daisy is central. She is the star of the search team. I mean, Nemeth, the guy, tells them right off, we're going to do what Daisy needs. And none of us are probably going to find Timothy O'Day, but Daisy hopefully will.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about Bob. He's a Bigfoot hunter. And that is not, you know, comic relief in the story. That's actually a real thing that, you know, go into a little bit of that. You explained it very well in the book, but for people that haven't read the book yet, talk about what the relevance a Bigfoot hunter would have in a search and rescue mission.
All right, and I have a question for you after this too, because I think one of the things when you go as an author to do research, and you clearly do tons of research, is there things you think you need to know, and then there's always that thing you didn't even know you didn't even know. Right. And when I started getting into these national missing persons and national public lands, one of the first things that comes up is there's no nationwide database. It's not something the government is tracking at, you know, the aggregate level. In fact, the best source of data in real life is the North American Bigfoot Association Society. I can't quite remember now. And part of it is they're tracking anomalies for their own interests. In fact, they're in the middle of a big mapping project of the United States. They're also, by definition, people who hike and are outdoors all the time. And often they are part of searches. They volunteer for searches. There's a few pretty prominent missing persons cases in the Olympic Peninsula. But the Bigfoot hunters, if they're out, they're still keeping an eye out. They're still seeing if they can't find the person, get closure for the family. So yeah, Bigfoot hunter. So it's like Bigfoot Bob, who I have to admit, next to Daisy, he's probably my favorite character.
Yeah, he was very well drawn. I thought it was great. I feel like we're talking a lot about search and rescue, and we're talking about this missing young man, which is at the center of the book. But it's very much a thriller. This is very much a thriller, and it's a mystery as well, with a lot of twists and turns. And I have to say, and I mean this truly, as a reader, as we both are, I'm sure, you read a lot of books or you see a lot of movies or TV shows where the setup, the first couple of acts don't actually, the third act doesn't really pay off. In other words, you're hyped all along the way, and then the actual, the reveal is not as thrilling as the setup has been. And, gosh, we're probably all been guilty of writing something like that before. But I have to say, the third act of this story just went bigger and bolder and wilder than I had imagined. And that's what kept me reading through to the end of it today. And, it sort of gave me the question, you said you don't know how these books end when you start them. Can you go into a little bit of the writing process? Because, I mean, obviously you did your research. Obviously you had a story about, these people going into the woods to try and find this guy. But things just go bonkers in a really exciting way in the story with that I did not expect. How did that formulate without going into, I'm not going to ruin anything, but I would just say the third act it's worth the price of admission for sure.
So you and I will both agree we're thriller writers and we're commercial fiction writers. Both you and I work really well under deadline, and we know what it is we're writing for our audience. So I want to do hiking and I want to have cadaver dogs because, it gives me a good excuse to go play. But you're right. Just people roaming the woods looking for a lost hiker is not a thriller. So immediately it has to be, what's at stake here? And then from that, and I didn't plot it out. I kind of started with my group of 8 and waited, almost as weird as this sound, to see what their group chemistry was. Like Frankie makes this really interesting observation right in the beginning. And, I realize things and then, Frankie knows them, which is she keeps referring to it. It's a group that's not a group. You got the 3 guilt-stricken guys to one side. You got the vengeful father over here, the stoic guide, and then kind of the semi-professionals, the dog handler, Bigfoot Bob, Frankie. So they lack cohesion. And it's like, well, that's always a fun thing to play with when you're a thriller writer, of course. Okay, now let's introduce a great deal of stress and see what happened to this group. And from that, it kind of just kept unspooling. And at a certain point, I'm like, kind of think this is Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None goes for a hike. And I always liked And Then There Were None. So I went with it. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, that's really cool. So this has been picked up, I understand, with Hilary Swank to produce and to star in a Frankie Elkin, if not this book, the series or the character. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah, so I was very lucky, and I really want to hear more about the movie coming out for you now too. But Hilary Swank last year, it was kind of my excitement of 2021. She and E1 production companies optioned it. Hilary Swank does want to co-produce and star. I'm not a writer who pictures people when I'm writing, like stars, like that's who my character is. But when I zoomed with Hilary Swank, I'm like, oh my God, she totally, even physically, she looks exactly the way I described Frankie, but more she has that approachability, because I think that's kind of Frankie's thing compared to other characters I've done. She's approachable. She's empathetic. She's a good listener. You would totally hang out with her at a bar kind of thing. And so we don't have much news yet. These things take time. So I want to hear all about your phone ringing and your fun news with the Gray Man series. Tell us.
Yeah, there was a phone call. That's my first book came out in 2009, and it was actually optioned for film before it even came out. But it was a paperback release, a very modest release. It wasn't, blowing the doors off of anything. It wasn't until I started working with Clancy a few years later that my name as a writer got anywhere. But this project had been in Hollywood, just getting kicked around from one place to another. And I was pleased that the checks always cleared, but I never really thought anything was going to come out of it. And it's also kind of a little feather in your cap. You can be like, well, Hollywood is interested in this story. But then after a lot of false starts, I guess it was a year ago, last July, so a year and a half ago, they announced that they would actually shoot The Gray Man off of a script that was written by Joe Russo, the Russo brothers, who directed it. And years ago, when they were first interested in the story, they had me come out to California for a couple of days and work on the, just talk to them about ideas about the character in the film. But they ended up shooting it this year with Ryan Gosling starring as the hero and Chris Evans starring as the villain. It's also got Billy Bob Thornton and Ana de Armas and some other characters. And it's going to be on Netflix. And it's not a series, it's a film. They're talking about, making this a franchise and doing more, but I have very much told myself that I should shut up and be pleased that, one is getting made, and anything else that happens after that, it's either way, you're happy to be there.
On behalf of all the women on Zoom right now, did you get to meet Ryan Gosling or Chris Evans? Just
I have not met them, and I don't. Maybe I will someday, but no, I didn't get to meet them. I wasn't on set there because of COVID rules, and also because, as you probably know this too, it's like you're writing books. I write 2 books a year, and so it's like every day seems to be surrounded by how many words I need to crank out.
Yeah, and the stupid COVID rules, because that would have been really a great experience for you. So
that would have been something.
Hopefully they'll franchise it, and then you'll have plenty of more opportunities to come.
That would be great. I know you've done other things with film and TV. Can you sort of talk about in general your experience with that?
There's been some TV movies, and like you said, you're pretty much removed from them. I did get to go to the set for one of my books, Hide, while it was being filmed, and that was really fun. They were filming, working the opening sequence, which was the discovery of mummified remains. And so they'd actually built what was going to be the underground chamber. And it was so creepy. The set designer had made it so creepy. Like the makeup woman wouldn't even go in there. The stars had to come out if they needed to be powdered. And I remember walking through this thinking, this is really awful. And he's like, I got it from your book. I'm like, really? Is how I'm disturbed about me.
Once you saw it manifested in reality, you're like, whoa, maybe I should have ratcheted that down just a little bit. Well, my last question for you is, what is next? Is there going to be more Frankie Elkin, or are you working on something else, or have you have something else in the can? What's coming up next for you?
Well, and normally I would have an answer for you, because like you, under contract, you're working on the next book. But I kind of opted for the penguins in Antarctica instead. So, because I was there. So now I'm thinking about things, but I think we've also established I don't plan ahead well.
Right.
I'm waiting for the right crime to capture my attention, but there are a few things niggling away at me. Do you plot, or do you pants? Do you have this all worked out in your mind, what you're doing?
I don't. I mean, it's a little bit of a hybrid. I usually write up a little something, and then I never even refer back to it again. It just gets the story in my head. And then my books end up being very, very long, because I probably from working with Tom Clancy for several years. But it's like as I'm writing it, as I'm sort of pantsing my way along, I'm kind of like, well, I wonder if he had a brother, what that would be like, and then that becomes a character and stuff like that. And once you're in the editing process, you realize if you have any fat in there, you need to trim. But it's a lot of fun. I look forward to the day where I can take a little break, and I think that's probably really good for your writing mind, for you to be like, I'm going to go look at penguins. There's not going to be a internet, a big crime with penguins that you're going to necessarily write about. It's not going to be a murder mystery with polar bears or anything like that. So that was probably good for your soul to get out there and get away from just banging at the keyboard all day.
I love nature. I mean, it's where I live. It's my lifestyle. It's how I recharge and how I problem solve things. So the opportunity to spend a month in Antarctica was just unbelievable. And you talk about wide open spaces, and people say you don't know the color blue till you see the icebergs, and they're totally right.
Oh, wow.
You don't know the color blue till you see a glacier.
Wow. And this was a cruise. This was a cruise that went down there, and you stayed on a boat overnight, but you got out onto the. Wow.
It was National Geographic. Mm-hmm. So, and great naturalists, learned a lot, really nice people on board, and you get to do fun stuff. So there was hiking even down there, kayak through glaciers, and just, you could sit on a beach with penguins forever, I gotta admit.
Yeah.
So clearly I'm distracted, but yes, write a thriller novel. It's on my list of things to do.
All right. We'll be looking for a penguin to make a cameo some strange way. You just have to pull that off. You've got the chops to pull that off. I've got some
penguin?
yeah, exactly. I have a question from Mary, and I really like this question. This was something I should have written down for you, but it's, do either of you have tips for getting the juices flowing for writing every day? What's your philosophy on that?
So that's something that I was basically talking about, like hiking for me, or people call it active meditation. A lot of authors or writers will talk about driving a car kind of gets you thinking. There's movements that are rote, but keep your mind able to churn. The other trick I learned a lot of years ago, and it's kind of silly, but it really works, is you light a scented candle and you keep that scent for the entire novel, and it becomes just a trigger. When you smell that, it kind of transitions you. It's the conditioned response to writing. That particularly when I had a small child at home, that really helped a lot, because it was very difficult to go from mom to writer. And, you lit the candle. I pick like a scent per book or whatever. And then it's like, okay, it kind of got you in the mindset. How about you, Mark?
Yeah. Well, I do a few things rote, as you said. Like I come and sit down on my computer as soon as I can in the morning, and I put on headphones and I listen to the sound of rain, and that's just where I'm writing. And so I open up my, the document, whatever it is I'm working on, and just start from there. And I think what helps me, and like a skill that I have that's probably led to more success, is that I'm able to go to any part of the book and kind of work there, because I get stuck. If people say, do you have writer's block? And I'm like, I have writer's block right this minute. It's like,
you don't write in a linear fashion, like you.
No, not really. I'll start the book and that'll kind of be churning along a little bit. But if I get stuck in a place, I'll be like, well, I know that they need to get to Istanbul, so how are they going to do that? So, my Word document, I always say, like, if I kick the bucket, 2 days before my book is done, it would be worthless. Then my estate would have to just throw it away, because it's all gobbledygook until it really comes together at the very end. I don't even like my books until 3 days before I give it to my editor. But I have this thing where I can just sort of go and focus on it a little bit, and I write well in the morning. So it's just doing it. And nothing breeds success like success. So you just, if you made yourself, and you hated to do it, and you made yourself go write 5 days in a row, it would be pretty easy on day 6, because you'd be like, well, I'm almost finished with this chapter, or I can start this new chapter. So, like anything, there's this hurdle of really getting started. But once you kind of get the discipline to just do a little bit here and a little bit there, then I think
you have to get in the habit, like you said. I was comparing to going to the gym. If you go regularly, you might not still want to, but you'll do it. When you take time off, coming back is so much harder. And sometimes giving small goals, like, if I'm really cold or just not into it, like, okay, just a page, just try to get one good page. And inevitably, once you get going, other things, things start happening.
I will say self-loathing helps me a lot. I get really mad at myself if I'm not working hard enough. And I have this inner dialogue that kind of like, it's like a drill sergeant or something that makes me get in my seat. All right, so here's another question from Sarah. Lisa, is there a setting you haven't written about yet that you'd like to set a story in?
That's a fascinating question. It's interesting, because one of the things about Frankie and that idea, and I guess it is becoming a series now, is suddenly I have an open playing field. Because before I was doing, Detective Dee Dee Warren, who's a Boston cop. So it was Boston, Boston, Boston. So I think even I get to think about how I want to take advantage of this. And I think, probably it'll be someplace in the US I just really want to visit and spend some time on. And again, I can tell my publisher I'm working. What things will happen. I'm going to Hawaii in April. I could probably just, there's some people there.
That's great. And it's a great write-off too, let's be honest.
Like the way you think, Mark.
Hawaii would be a terrific location, obviously. You would, maybe we can all sort of crowdsource your next book now. You're looking for a new thriller. So, all right, I have another question. This is from Dan. What is the best and worst parts of being a best-selling author?
Oh, this is a good question.
That is a good question.
I still remember, and you have to answer this too, Mark. So I still remember the first time I hit the New York Times list, my agent calling me and saying, congratulations. I, interesting enough, had a puppy at that time, and I was outside trying to just get the dog to pee. And he's like, you're now like a 500-pound gorilla. And I'm like, not really sure that was my ambition. And I'm still not helping. I think the success part's really great, but I think there is this moment when you realize that also doesn't change anything. Because I had this genuine moment the next day of sitting down at the keyboard going, ha ha ha, I'm New York Times bestseller. I am a 500-pound gorilla. And the blank computer screen did not care.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
So I think the self-loathing you talked about, or just this never gets easier. So yeah. But it feels like it should.
Yeah. So is that the best and the worst?
I think it's all wrapped up in that. I will say at this stage in my career, I focus way more on process now and way less. At a certain point, all those bestseller lists, reviews, all that stuff comes and goes.
Yeah.
Writing is an intimate process. It's you, your computer, your imagination, and it's how you make that happen that's going to build a career and make it work. So your turn.
I would say for me, the best part is, the writers get the attention, but we're all part of a big team, and we're cogs in a system. And so, early on in my career, there were people that had to roll the dice on me, and a lot of people didn't. And I'm still with that agent. I'm still with that editor and the publicity team from there, and the marketing team. And they've been with me the long haul as things have gotten bigger and better. And like the excitement, a big part of the excitement. I ask myself this a lot. It's like, I don't really have ambition that involves anything other than like trying to write the next good book. And when your book comes out, like right now, you're taking your victory lap, but this is the book you wrote last year, and you're like, well, what have I done lately, or whatever. So I always run into that. So it's the best part about it is that the people that have trusted you and are working with you, you're part of a team and you're doing your part for the team. So that's a lot of fun, exciting. The worst part of it for me, for sure, is I'm very much a people pleaser, and I hate saying no. And when you get to a certain level where 13 people a day are asking you to read their book, or to give you a blurb, or to give you advice, or to write a book about them, or to write a book about the conversation they had with somebody, or whatever, you feel bad saying no. And I feel like I do that all day long. So that's kind of the thing. You sort of wish you could kind of stay at that level where you did have the time for these conversations and whatever. But I mean, it's a good problem to have at the end of the day.
Yeah,
so
that's well said.
Yeah. All right. So I have another one. This one's from Ryan. For both of you, if you didn't write in the genre you write, what sort of books would you like to try?
Oh, you have to go first. I can't even think of an answer to that one.
Well, I have an answer to that. I have a romantic suspense story that I want to write. But I'm not a romance writer. It's like I'm going to collab with somebody and do it, because I very much believe in the story and the characters and stuff like that. But I'm like, this book would be so great to read, but I'm not sure I'm the writer for it. And I'm the writer for some parts, but maybe not for others. So I don't know that'll ever happen. But I've had this story in my head for 10 years that how it is, where you just have little ideas that just flesh out automatically over time. Even when you're on deadline for something else, you start thinking about this other thing. So I mean, I was sort of leave the kind of action military espionage thriller a little bit and do a little side shuffle to a different type of thriller. That's about as far away from the genre as I think I'll ever get.
Well, I've kind of moved around a lot already. So I started in romance, and even the first few of my thrillers, I think you'd call romantic suspense. So sometime we should talk about your idea.
Yeah, we should talk about it. Yeah.
And I started out with the classic serial killer books. And then I did the police procedural with D.D. Warren. And now I'm kind of the amateur sleuth. And the Frankie books are all first person. And I started my career writing third person. So I think there's ways of moving around within the genre umbrella of being a thriller writer that has kept me interested, so you don't get bored. I love to read young adult. In fact, I read all sorts of genres. I'm not very genre specific, but as much as I like reading those books, and I love historicals as well, I don't think I have the writing chops for writing them. And I think sometimes it's good to have the things that you can relax and enjoy and admire with
absolutely, without having to struggle through it yourself. Yeah, historical fiction. I'm just so impressed with that when they get the dialogue and all the period stuff. And you know, there's a Civil War series that is just the best thing I've ever read in my life. And I couldn't do it in a million years, but I love it. Just because you're a writer and you love something doesn't necessarily mean it's right for you. But but you're absolutely right.
Again, on behalf of all the women watching on Zoom, the lead from the Bridgerton series, Julia Quinn's Netflix series, didn't he just join your movie cast as well?
Yeah, he's in the film, and he has a recurring role. So hopefully they'll franchise it, because the character he plays is in 5 or 6 of the books so far. So you know, I'm hoping he enjoyed shooting that, and I'm hoping you know, the Netflix does well, so they'll do another one, because then that would, hopefully he'll come back. Yeah. Well, that is pretty much all the time we have. I want to thank you so much, Lisa, for having me on and having me do this. Your book is terrific. I read it in 2 days. It's a really cool setup that makes you just, you know, excited for what's to come, and then it pays off in such a big way, just the way that we all want thrillers to read. So I had a terrific time reading it, and thanks so much for talking to me tonight, and enjoyed it.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and I'm very excited. It's just in a couple weeks now, we'll see Sierra 6, the next installment of the Gray Man series, and that will be very exciting, and I can't wait to read it. And thank you so much for having us, a tattered cover.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And Mark, I apologize. I did say that Sierra 6 was already out, but of course I meant it's available for pre-order on tatteredcover.com.
Yeah,
One Step Too Far is available now. Just the links are in the YouTube chat. Thank you to everyone who joined live. I did discover, I just want to let you will both know, but you don't need to know. But if you're out there watching, I know that a link was incorrect on the last email we sent. So if you missed the first part of this, it's on YouTube, youtube.com/tatteredcover. You could hear Lisa and Mark were just talking. It was amazing. Like, two best-selling experts basically in what you do. This was awesome. So thank you both so much. If we ever can do this in person, I would love to do it in person.
Me too. That'd be fun.
Great. Yeah. And here's the Thriller Fest in June, and seeing people in person again. Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Thriller Fest. Thank you, everyone out there in virtual land. Thank you, Mark and Lisa, so much. Congratulations on your book and the one coming out, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.